Hey y'all, so as promised, I did want to provide a review of this book, Worthy by Jada Pinkett Smith. Overall, 10 out of 10, highly recommend, go get it, go read it, all right? And this was a book that I had not planned on reading at all, just simply because I'm not a Jada Pinkett Smith fan. And that's not to say that I don't like her, rather than I just don't find a lot of inspiration from actors and actresses, just that medium of entertainment. I'm entertained, especially like her 90s movies and stuff. But she's not somebody that I followed. Her body of work I didn't follow. I'm more into books and music, but that's just me. But the reason why I did read her book was, number one, because I did read Will Smith's book, which was phenomenal. I did a review on his. You can go back down my page and look for it. It's there. And because there were so many people that were trying to intentionally discredit her, that I know that when that happens, and when it happens to a woman, 10 times out of 10, she has something to say. So I want to know. I want to, place an opinion from a point of being informed as opposed to a point of emotion and just what we were getting from sound bites. And those sound bites were just that. They're designed to engage the audience. They're designed to capture your attention. But I think it's very ignorant of people to form, whole opinions based off of a sound bite. Get the book, read it, and then form your opinion from there. The book is split up into 4 parts. She speaks to her relationship with her grandparents and her mother in the first part and how she was raised in Baltimore. She speaks to her relationship with Pac. She speaks to her relationship with Will, and she speaks to her relationship with her children. And her relationship with her children was one of the reasons why this book just moved me so, because the weight of motherhood is universal. And the things that she talks about, I felt right here as a mom. And I'm going to be honest, I cried my way through the majority of that part of the book, just because some of the things that she talks about, regardless of how much money you have, regardless of who your children are, what they turn out to be, you just feel as a mother. Some of the things I was surprised about was that both her parents were addicts. I knew her mother was an addict, and I think I may have heard in the wind that her dad was an addict at one point in time. But her mother was a functioning heroin addict. She was a registered nurse who worked in the maternity ward at a hospital there in Baltimore, but she was hooked on heroin. Her mother is on marriage number 4 right now. So there were men in and out of her life, some that she really connected to and some that she didn't. But what was moving to me about her relationship with her father was that she was about 10 years old, I believe, when she said that her father was with her one day and he turned to her and said, look, I'm not able to be a father to you. Essentially, I'm not cut like that. And it just is what it is. And that was their relationship. And he was in and out of her life, more out than in. For the majority of his life, he's deceased now. But I couldn't imagine being a 10-year-old girl and having to hear that from someone who gave you the gift of life, to say that I'm not cut like that. I'm not designed to be in your life like that. When she talks about her relationship with her grandparents, it's just one that's traditionally, if you've had grandparents that you were raised around, you know what a gift that is to have grandparents and the special relationship that you have with them. She speaks at length about that. Let's get into the other parts of the book that I know that you all are more interested in. Her relationship with Pac, the connection between them was essentially, the foundation for that was because they were both children of addicts. And because of the environment that she was in Baltimore at that time, during the crack era, either you were doing drugs or you were selling drugs. And she decided to sell drugs because she realized that she didn't have a stable home. Her mother was always moving in and out with her grandparents, moving in and out with these men. And she just didn't have the stability that most children are exposed to during childhood and adolescence. So her version of control was to have her own money and to have a lot of it. So she decided to start selling drugs, crack specifically. And she talks about her experiences with that. She has a couple of life and death encounters with that. And during that time, her relationship with Pac was formed around their love of the arts. And again, the fact that they were both children of drug addicts. And whenever she was down, he had her back. And whenever he was down, which was often because he lived and was raised in extreme poverty, she had his back. And I just think it's interesting that some adults are unable to conceptualize that men and women can truly be friends. And that's all it was. They were friends, and there was no undercurrent of a sexual or romantic attraction there. They really, truly were friends. Now, she does talk about the fact that they did try. They did say to themselves, like, it makes no sense that we have this amazing chemistry between us and we're not boyfriend and girlfriend. We don't have a romantic relationship. But she said the one time that they kissed, it was disgusting because she felt like she was kissing her brother and he felt like he was kissing his sister. And this relationship carried on into their adulthood. And even when she talks at length about, when she first got on in Hollywood and when he started being hot in the music business and when he went to jail and she went to go visit him, and the detailed description she gave of seeing him in prison, it transported you there. And you felt all of the emotions that she felt seeing her friend in shackles and defeated. And that's when he was at Rikers. Now, when he was transported to Demora, I think I'm pronouncing that right, after he was convicted on the sexual abuse allegations, that's when that started a rift between them, because he had told her, I'm signing with Death Row because Suge is going to pay my bail. He had a $1.3 million bond to get him out of jail that no one was able to pay. No one was able to put up the money for. And she said that even though she understood him wanting to get out of jail because she said that he was the only one that was doing the time, she heavily disagreed with it. But let me pedal back. She also talked about when he was at Rikers, she was the only one that was writing him. She was the only one that was keeping in touch with him. She was trying to figure out a way and working with his lawyers and paying some of his legal fees to get him out. And he told her to stop. He told her, like, no, he said, it's enough men that are making money off of me that should be able to get me out. He said, I need you to just make sure that my mama's straight, pay her bills, make sure she's good. And when they were writing letters back and forth, he told her, like, you're the only one that loves me. And that's where the marriage proposal came from. And she said she was extremely torn because he told her if she didn't say yes, he didn't think he could survive. And she just knew that, marriage ain't for us. And she was just like, he's saying this because he wanted somebody to do time with him. And when he eventually got out, he realized that her saying no to his marriage proposal was the right thing. But when he did get out and they did meet up, their last conversation, they got into it. They got into it really bad because she told him she didn't like how he was moving. She didn't like how he was moving since he had signed with Death Row. And he basically told her, like, you used to be a real one, but now you all Hollywood now. I don't know who you are. And she took offense to that, and they went their separate ways. And that was the last time she talked to him. And as we know, thereafter he was killed and died, and they never had another conversation after that, which was in itself just tragic. I know y'all want to get into talking about her and Will's relationship. And even in Will's book, he talks about how Jada was reluctant to marry him. And the only reason they got married, to be honest with you, was because she was pregnant with Jada. And her mother, like, insisted on her being married. She said, you have to be married. But her mother was saying that from the trauma that she experienced as being a teenage mother. Her mother had her when she was 17, I believe. And her mother's mother had her as a teenager too. So she's thinking, like, hey, if this is what you're going to do, you have to do it the right way and get married. And when her and Will decided to get married, he came to her and said, you know, hey, my team is telling me I need to get a prenup. And this was off of the back of his previous marriage where he had a huge tax debt to pay. He was paying child support. He was paying alimony. And they were just saying like, hey, we don't want to see you end up in a similar situation when you get married again. And her response to that was, if we have to think about how our marriage is going to end, then why are we getting married in the first place? And they made a promise to each other before they got married that there would never be a reason for the prenup to come into play because they were never going to get divorced. And one of the things that I interject from that is that marriage is never linear. Marriage is very, very hard. There is no such thing as when we say I do, it's up from here. It is up, down. Sometimes it's up, up, up. Sometimes it's down, down, down. And anybody that can stick in there and ride that wave with somebody and ride those waves with somebody, I think that that's admirable. That's just my personal opinion. And that's something that she and her husband have decided to do. Now, does it look conventional? Absolutely not. And that includes them being separated and deciding to be divorced, but not in a legal sense, but rather going to live in separate households and live their lives separately. The other thing I find so interesting about people's opinions about Jada is that, do we actually think that Will Smith, one of the richest men in Hollywood, ain't out here doing his thing? Do we honestly think that? Just let that sit with you for a minute, okay? And for those of you all that are saying, well, she embarrasses him and she humiliates him, do we actually believe that anytime she has gone public with any information, there wasn't a private conversation that happened first? And she talks about that. Before they had the Red Table Talk, she initially was going to out herself in response to August Alsina talking about it. And y'all, even though I don't agree with you having a relationship with your son's friend, is that weird to me? Yeah, but I also know things happen. And that's not to provide an excuse. It just is what it is. But it also was a consensual relationship between two adults. And he started talking about it. And so she felt as though she had to take accountability for her actions. So she wanted to talk about it. And she initially was going to do it on her own on the Red Table Talk. But when she discussed it with Will, he said, no, I'm going out there with you. Like, we a team. And I need for people to know that I got your back no matter what. Now, his reactions during the Red Table Talk, she gets into, and there were some other extenuating circumstances that had nothing to do with the content that was being delivered and why he was crying and why eyes were watering and all that other stuff. But read the book and you'll find out that the story that was being presented is vastly different than what it actually was. And that's the importance of actually reading and not reacting off of sound bites. When she talks about the reasons why they decide to separate, it's, again, marriage is very hard. It's hard to come together and stay with someone who, I won't say is raised in opposition of you, but rather that was just raised differently than you. We all come from different backgrounds. I don't care who's raised next door to each other. Those households run differently. And he talks about it in his book where he says his love language is vastly different than hers. And he thought that if he loved her in the way that he thought that she should be loved, that should be enough. And quite simply, it wasn't. I also think that another reason why people have such strong opinions about their marriage is because we become uncomfortable when someone chooses to expose their scars, their wounds, their scratches, because it reminds us that we have them. And it also reminds us that we have them, we're hiding from them, and that we're hiding them, the scars and the wounds and scratches themselves. And I honestly believe that the level of transparency that this requires comes with the bravery, courageousness, and bravado that we are conditioned to only expect from men. So when a woman does it, we automatically attack it and say that she's wrong and she's being inappropriate and she's humiliating her husband and how dare she. And I just think that that's wrong. I also think that these respectability politics have us in a chokehold about what's proper and what's appropriate. When you are not transparent about your story, or when anybody is not transparent with their story, it will have other people believing that their traumas are exclusive to them. And that is a breeding ground for suicidal and otherwise self-damaging thoughts. And her whole purpose of being transparent is to let other people know that, hey, I'm in this situation and I know I'm not by myself, but this is how I encountered it and this is how I handled it and this is how I came out on the other side of it. The whole purpose is not to embarrass him. It ain't about Will. It was about her. And I think that if we keep that in perspective, it's not about him. It was about her. Regardless of whether we think how she said it or the method or the delivery was wrong, the purpose of it was to heal, was to provide healing. And I just think that that's kind of lost on this whole thing. When it comes to her children, she talks about how people have talked crap about her all these years about how she chose to raise her children. And I think how she chose to raise her children is admirable. Why do we think it's weird? Because they're different. Her children were afforded the space, time, and opportunity to fully express themselves. And we think that's weird because why? Because her son wore a skirt and her daughter shaved her head? There's reasons for that. Read the book and find out. Instead of just looking at something and saying, oh, because it's different, it must be wrong. If we thought that about everything that we encountered was different, it must be wrong, what does that sound like? Sit with that for a minute. What does that sound like? Because it's different, it must be wrong. Makes us no better, folks. One of the things she talks about when it comes to her children, specifically Jada, she talks about how painful it can be for a mother to witness her son grow into a man. And I'm going to try not to cry because I have two sons. I have two adult sons. And she speaks about in the book, there's a reason why in African villages, when a boy child comes of age, his father steals him in the middle of the night and they take him off for weeks for manhood training. Because there are things as women, I just feel like we shouldn't be privy to when it comes to a man, when it comes to a boy growing into his manhood. And that's what I mean when I say the weight of motherhood is universal. With girls, you can kind of shape them because they're watching you. They stick close to you. If you're doing this thing right, your daughter sticks close to you. But with boys, all children just sit on your heart after a while. And this woman is no different. And what I admire about her is that she chose to put her children's happiness over y'all's opinions. She chose to say, screw what other people think. I'm more concerned with my children being happy. And that alone in itself is something that should be applauded. And overall, what I would want people to take from her book, from reading her book or exploring her book, is just to how to operate in truth and being authentic. And I think that so few of us do that, that when we see somebody do that, we either lean into it or we attack it. And it was just disheartening to see it being attacked when it should be embraced. I hope you guys read the book. I love y'all for real. Take care.